Our history clearly records how the women of the 20th century stood idly by, while the atmosphere was contaminated, and the children of the future doomed.
You're one of them. One of those freaks. Stay back, Clem. She'll burn you.
So, I am really surprised at what I'm finding out now, mostly through YouTube, and holy smokes, this is really a time to really watch history being made. And so
Well, let's see how much it costs to move 1,000 people. Yes. Don't forget the decimal point. Gore says.
Hey, he's pretty close.
you know, you don't have to immerse yourself in an overwhelming media explosion that is largely generated by artificial intelligent duplication. Anyway, you're caught up in a maelstrom of industrial-made gossip. Think about that your culture is defined by industrial information waste, gossip, and modern-day superstition. Flat Earth. And welcome back to Culture Shocked. And this is me reminiscing about my very happy childhood memories of the mass media of the mid-60s and how totally exciting that transition from 1965 to 1970 really was. One of the most incredible flowering explosions of popular culture, independent film, a whole amazing shift that happens in what is a relatively short time. Though, when you're 5 to 10 years old, it seems like forever. It really seems a lot longer. You'll get over that, don't worry about it. And of course, my somewhat unusual story is I dropped out of watching television decades ago. I completely lost touch of mass media in a very major way, except for reading comic books. That was always one of the things, other than still being, into rock and roll like us old people are. But there's very little, very few movies and whatnot. But anyway, so I am really surprised at what I'm finding out now, mostly through YouTube, and holy smokes, this is really a time to really watch history being made. And so the next 5 years are going to be pretty darn exciting. And I think the last 5 years of watching YouTube develop, as I've been kicking this idea around ever since I reorganized the comic book collection. And so we are in a time of tremendous change, and we are going to try to stay positive about it all because, well, I'm up here in the frozen north of Canada and sipping maple syrup and, not panicking because we don't need to. worried up here. Hold it together. We're going to find a way through it all. So we are jumping out of the chronological development that we have just basically started to make what we will call our Labor Day special, where we're going to go back and talk about one of the absolutely central, most important characters that Jack Kirby created and how it shows his original system. And by focusing in on one of Kirby's most important characters, we'll also see how he began his system, and we can see how his very early work really dug into the science fiction films of the 1950s and the earlier 60s, and all of that material all is getting reworked into his work in a way nobody else was really doing. And we'll be able to talk about a lot of different things in the process of talking something that seems innocent on the surface, doesn't it? And in that regard, we're taking a special episode of Culture Shock to talk about one of my favorite reprints of all time. It's not very impressive on the surface, is it? No, but there's two reprints, and there are two Kang stories are reprinted in here, and they used the Spider-Man cover from the second appearance rather than the Jack Kirby original. But we will have a look at that because Kang is, after all, one of the greatest villains that Kirby ever made. Now, another major media heavyweight is, of course, the illustrious Mr. J.P. Patches, who we mentioned earlier. And J.P. Patches, somebody I discovered in high school. I moved closer into the Lower Mainland area and so I moved for my last 2 years of high school, and so ended up getting more television channels. So I discovered J.P. Patches really right at the same time that I was discovering Monty Python on PBS, actually. And so I was watching Monty Python and really enjoyed the idea of the absurdity, and then we, of course, discovered this broadcaster who was doing a morning television show that was just hilariously improvised. It was all very clearly improvised. Everybody in the crew was helping out. The producer actually was their version of the late night movie vampire host, who was one of the great ones, the greatest howl of all time. But of course, Count Floyd was far funnier, but that's splitting hairs. They were all great broadcasters. And anyway, that was a much more playful approach. And there's something about the just improvised low rent thing about broadcasting that I really like. The idea of the fanzine. Things are getting too polished. It bugs me. This AI thing is going to be really problematic. I'm a bit of a Luddite on many levels. Never drove a car, never played video games. So in many ways, I'm a very non-technological person. And so I broke away from television in the 80s. So my memories of mass culture are very much out of date. I remember things from the 1980s, and I remember... what are you doing there? Upstage. Great broadcasters as J.P. Patches.
Would you like to play a little final by the way time?
Yes, by the way, let's see. I better get this one.
This has nothing much to do with anything in general, except it's kind of interesting, by the way. Do you know how much it costs to move 1,000 people on an escalator?
Well, let's see how much it costs to move 1,000 people. Yes. Don't forget the decimal point. Gore says...
Hey, he's pretty close, you know.
And I come from the unimaginable land of Canada, the West Coast. I became aware of Northwest Coast broadcaster known as J.P. Patches in the late 1970s, and he stands up in my mind one of the great communicators of all time.
That's wrong, because You see those 1,000 people going by and shop, and that's why it costs $50,000.
Oh, I see.
Right.
Well, whatever you say.
And it seems to me that perhaps there's something in his style and technique that we could learn from in this troubled day and age. Now, I've already spoken out about my rather harsh opinion of the MCU appearance of Kang the Conqueror, who is, of course, one of our all-time favorite villains, and realize that you actually were referencing a completely different character. It was not even depicting the actual character of Kang in the first place. And I could never go watch that movie. Watching the reviews was really good enough. What they did to MODOK is just absolutely criminal, and it is, well, once we get to the point of talking about how MODOK fits into Kirby's long developing story ideas, it is one of the grandest pratfalls of Marvel Comics, and Stan Lee's complete misunderstanding of the character of MODOK, of course, continues through the representation of the character ever since, and it is painfully hilarious. And we'll go into that in detail some other time. Now, Kang also ties into the ongoing story of Doctor Doom and the interrelation to the other time-traveling character, Rama Tut. And all of this ties together into creating a super villain of an ultra-futuristic warlord tyrant who is ultimately, again, the ultimate future fascist. As we see in Kirby's work all the way through, he is always warning us about the danger of fascism, and far in the future we will have an even more radical and terrible form of fascism. And that truly is the key part of the story that is not necessarily something a corporate enterprise wants to be too critical of. The other thing about the character of Kang is, reading the story again, of course, it reminded me of a particular science fiction movie that I saw probably one time when I was quite young. And of course, we watched many science fiction movies on television, and so we'd seen this whole inventory, and there was one particular one that stood out in my mind that I think was really critical in the development of the uniqueness of the Kang character that was lost in the later Marvel Comics. And of course, now we have YouTube, and so if you remember the biggest fragment of things, you can track them down. And of course, sure enough, I tracked down one of the greatest B movies of all time, a futuristic, paranoid, post-apocalyptic nuclear war tale called The Terror from the year 5000. And looking back on it, it turns out to be just a fabulous film, really worth looking at. So we will go back to my earlier analysis of this before the urgency that we are now feeling about the concept of fascism and what we really want to be aware of. And a real key thing about fascism that you really have to get into your head is fascism only works if people believe a lot of things that are not true. All of the fundamental ideas of fascism are lies. None of it is true. This is the idealization of a very radical, patriarchal, war-based society that conquered an already very advanced civilization. And we all believe this silly misinformation that patriarchy began civilization, and archaeology has taught us that that is nowhere near the truth. And yet, somehow, the media perpetuates your ignorance. And I wonder why that is. Ka-ching! Now, one of the most incredible elements of the media landscape of the 1960s was that it was very rapidly changing. And where we started out with television being very dominant, radio and FM radio in particular, the development of stereophonic sound in the later part of the 60s begins to shift. The early part of the 1960s was really defined more by the movies that were being replayed. So the last 30 years of movies were being replayed for us in this constant cycle. One of the most influential of all was, of course, the 1930s horror films. The Dracula, Werewolf, Frankenstein films were having another revival on television. To just tell you about the thrilling films of my youth the way I used to. Now it's incredibly easy to show people those incredible films that of my youth of watching television, where of course in the 1950s it was teenagers' driving experiences, but nonetheless, one of the things that I'm really enjoying about the internet and YouTube in particular is that it's just so much easier to put things into context than it ever has been before. And of course, that's a real void in the media. The commercial media is, of course, context. And so we have to become fans of context, as it were. So let's take a fun little journey through my comparison of the great films I watched on television while I was reading some pretty fabulous comic books, which were also, which this one in particular, I also read in reprint. So reruns and reprints, it must be significant. The first few Fantastic Four issues are very much monster comics. Fantastic Four #4 is a particular salute to monster movies. There are very many references of how the mighty Thing is going to finally go toe-to-toe with a sea creature as powerful as himself. And of course, the Thing himself is represented by like the monsters that we had empathy for. And we saw that in the Son of Kong and Mighty Joe Young. The idea of big giant monsters, of course, was developed by Ray Harryhausen, and we see references directly to Ray Harryhausen, but Harryhausen also inspired the greatest aquatic dinosaur monster of all, the great Godzilla, which is, of course, kind of being given a bit of an homage here. And even there's a strange sequence of the Thing climbing into the mouth of the great big giant monster and fighting the monsters that live within the monster, which is another sequence that really is reminiscent of some of the great Harryhausen films. Now, in terms of the Avengers, Kirby did a short run on the Avengers, but he did create one of his all-time best villains, the incredible Kang the Conqueror. And of course, now we hear Kang is being referred to again. It's very important, however, to remember that Kang was an amalgamation of a bunch of ideas that Kirby had seen in 1950s horror movie or science fiction movies. The very spaceship that Kang flies in on is very clearly reference to Harryhausen's Earth versus the Flying Saucers. They have the ray guns, they have the force fields, and in fact, they even kind of land and deposit Kang in pretty much the same way. So very clearly we're introduced to the very powerful weapons that Kang has, but then he's referred to as Ram-Tut, who is one of Kirby's men from the future that appeared first in the Fantastic Four. He's touched on that many times, and in this iteration, we have him going so far into the future, the world has just become an ongoing war, and we discovered that this was an atomic war because his very last trump card is that he himself is radioactive. So the language of 1950s science fiction movies was really in everybody's mind, and it was Jack Kirby who was the most fluent in translating those images onto the comic book page. So the film is based on a short story called Bottle Baby, which is working on the message in a bottle. And so Bottle Babies, of course, is a reference to the 1950s bottle-fed babies, which is maybe a very underlying context of the short story. I should read it one day. So the film Terror in the Year 5000 begins with a sequence of time travel experiments, and the story, is about this idea of messages being transferred from the very far future, and so this story evolves over a few instances of artifacts are transmitted back and forth. Of course, this is a really great example of a time machine. The sound effects of this are really brilliant. The use of the containment area with the window is incredible.
How is it? Should be there in a minute. Professor, look quickly. A woman. What?
Now, of course, one of the most important aspects of this trade of artifacts from the far future is that everything that's coming back from the year 5000 is incredibly radioactive. Subplot: the scientist has an assistant, and his assistant is, of course, the fiance of his beautiful daughter. And it is the development of his obsession with the experiment that drives the story further, as this very radioactive danger seems to maybe inspire a little bit of caution. Oh no, our obsessed young man is going to do some secret experimenting on his own, and when the doctor is off of their little island laboratory, he fires up the experiment on his own. And this is another great use of sound effects, a very automaton-like march, the squeal, like it's an amazing use of sound and light imagery to really make a very powerful first impression of a character. This startled me to such a degree as a child. I don't know if I actually watched it through the first time, because there are a few elements of this that I didn't recognize till watching it again. The young assistant has developed a certain illness that is very much like radiation poisoning somehow, and so they have to call for medical assistance and have a nurse sent to the island. So a medical professional is sent to the island to assist, and we have this very lovely nurse who shows up to perform that very role. The arrival of the nurse on the island and the confrontation between herself and our atomic Amazon from the future is another great use of black and white filmmaking. The juxtaposition of the very simple costume of the Terror, which is a black outfit with sequins, which just turns out to be an amazing device that they just get so much use out of. It's totally amazing to me that so much comes from so little with this film. But of course the chase scene, which is, every adventure movie has to have one, but the fact that this is two women who ultimately are the same woman are very statuesque, imposing figures indeed. And so then of course the chase scene with the black costume and the white nurse's uniform is just really like such a simple thing. It's just, again and again, this movie reminds me of The Road Warrior, with just such a great use of just such a shoestring kind of a budget and getting just so much effect.
Stashu, Peretna. Stashu, Peretna.
Who's there? What do you want?
You're speaking English.
Of course I'm speaking English. What did you expect?
But the letters on the key were in Greek.
Key? What key? Who are you? What do you want?
No, wait. You must help me.
No. Stay away from me. Your face. No. Stay away from me.
Now, after that dramatic chase scene, we have a scene which is so incredibly crucial to the development of Marvel Comics. It is amazing to me that it took me so long to find this. And of course, this is the device that the very mutated, terrifying looking atomic Amazon from the future has a mask that she applies to the nurse she is just chased down across the island, and with this futuristic mask she is able to transpose the beautiful features of our fallen nurse into a mask that she can now put on her face and completely assume the identity of a tragically fallen nurse. You can certainly see the effect this has on Ditko, and of course we can see a very long list of characters that involve masks, facelessness, the chameleon right away. Then we have Proteus, we have the Ghost, we have Mr. A, we have a great number of characters that really are based on this idea of the mask. This is clearly a huge influence on where some of these ideas took root in Ditko's head. But now, in terms of getting mileage out of the black sequin costume, we have another scene which, of course, becomes absolutely critical to the first appearance of Kang, and that is the very strange optical effects that are generated by our atomic Amazon's sequined outfit. And so we have the typical comedy relief janitor type character comes upon the Terror and is hypnotized by these strange flashing lights and optical effect that draws him to what turns out to be certain peril and a terrifying confrontation indeed. we see right away that this is just a really cool little optical effect. Didn't cost much, it's very super effective, had a big impact on Kirby, who of course the cover image of Kang is based on this idea of a wall of flashing lights that is his antimatter shield that can even repel the hammer of Thor itself. And I'm certainly just recognizing a really, really great creative optical device on a shoestring budget that Kirby and Ditko, as being huge fans of the science fiction medium, translated that into their own work and make it so vital and interesting to us, because it has just so many influences boiling. Another optical effect that is derived from the costume and the powers that it gives its wearer, there is a mind control element to this story as well. And so in this case we have a really fabulous image of the Terror in her nurse's disguise, now utilizing the same strange powers that are residing in her fingernails that she uses to mesmerize her hapless and, well, somewhat smitten patient.
Look at me. Am I so terrifying?
The face last night, it was... It was...
If you will listen, I shall explain.
And of course, we see right away where this idea transposes very quickly into the idea of rings, and we see this scene, which is kind of the germ of the idea for another great. And now that the Amazon has taken complete control over the somewhat rebellious lab assistant, takes him down to the laboratory and they fire up the time machine once more, and they're going to now go back to the future. And then they are confronted by the fiancé, who realizes there is trouble afoot, and questioning her fiancé about his rather questionable judgment.
She's hypnotized you. You don't know what you're doing.
You don't understand, Claire. I've got to go. They need help.
Oh, Victor, you're all confused.
It's you who are confused. Our history clearly records how the women of the 20th century stood idly by while the atmosphere was contaminated and the children of the future doomed.
She then has a physical confrontation with our big atomic Amazon, and as the claws come out, the futuristic mask is torn away, revealing the terrifying real face of the very mutated and radioactive Amazon from the future.
She's right, Claire.
If she's so right, why did she have to hypnotize you?
I warn you, don't force me to kill again.
Again? You're the thing that killed Angela.
He would have spoiled my mission.
Did you hear that, Victor? Did you? Now what do you think of your angel of mercy? Look at her, Victor! Look!
And once the Terror's terrifying face is revealed, Victor is shocked back to his senses, and he leaps to the defense of his fiancée. But no sooner does he do this when his face is raked by the very radioactive touch of the terrifying Terror herself, causing horrible radiation burns.
You're one of them. One of those freaks. Stay back, Clem. She'll burn you.
Revealing to us the real terrifying truth of the future, wherein the very environment has become so radioactive from continuous nuclear warfare that all living creatures are deeply radioactive themselves. Then the Two scientists who are searching for the Terror return just in time to see her trying to make it back to the future. He is shot and stumbles towards the time machine, and Victor, still clearly conflicted, chases after her. And in one of the most classic science fiction story enders, they are caught in a terrible electrical arc and electrocuted. Electricity being one of the obligatory monster killing elements, along with fire and, well, oxygen absorbing bombs, but I digress.
Don't do that!
And final look at the Terror shows us a stark contrast of the very beautiful nurse and the actual visage of the terrible Terror from the future. But we see that the root character that Kirby was inspired by in the creation of Kang is a really truly terrifying character, not only quite powerful, but really a creature that was the antithesis of life itself, which of course is a theme we'll see again in Kirby's work. But you can see why all the subsequent appearances of Kang have been just kind of diluting the really terrifying nature of the original character, and he's kind of become something of a panty waist bean counter kind of character, particularly in his new cinematic incarnation, and not the really profoundly terrifying existential threat that Kirby originally envisioned and used as the basis of his own personal mythology.
The future is what we make it.
Whether there will be creatures like her.
You know, you don't have to immerse yourself in an overwhelming media explosion that is largely generated by artificial intelligent duplication. Anyway, you're caught up in a maelstrom of industrial-made gossip. Think about that your culture is defined by industrial information waste, gossip, and modern-day superstition. Flat Earth.
Whether there will be creatures like her.
Depends on us.
On all of us.
On mankind. On what we do today, in the present.
This is played by the remarkable actress Salome Jens against the equally impressive Joyce Holden, the two stars of this movie. There's some men in it too, I suppose. But what I did, I did a bit of an internet search of the actress Salome Jens. I was shocked to realize that her iconic character has been indeed acknowledged, as she has played in several very important science fiction television shows. The most stunning of all, of course, is to realize that she is one of the most famous alien creatures ever on television, being one of the futuristic handlers in the Star Trek pilot. Don't recognize that? Here, let's compare this to some of the other many lovely images of her. And she reprises her Star Trek appearance with another appearance in Deep Space Nine with one of the founder characters. And side note, I think influenced Alan Moore in the setup of his dematerialization chamber in his version of the Dr. Manhattan. Because when we look at the actual origin of the original Captain Atom, upon whom the character of Dr. Manhattan is based, we see that Air Force Captain Atom was accidentally trapped in a space-bound experimental nuclear missile that blew him to Kingdom Come, and he then returns and rematerializes from being blown to quantum smithereens. Clearly, Alan Moore was drawing his inspiration for the dematerialization chamber from another source, and I would suggest that that source would be this film. But this is idle, finished speculation.